What's up? What's happening? What is popping? What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another great edition of Symone with the Sports. I'm Symone, bringing guys daily sports talk. So if you're new here, if you're old here and you haven't already subscribed to my channel, stop what you're doing, leave a comment, subscribe, keep rocking with me. Also, make sure you check out the links down below. The first one is to buy me a coffee to help fuel this channel. The second link is to shop the official Symone with the Sports, a merch collection. Get you the classic tee, the wavy tee, and the fly or die crew neck. But y'all, if you have not done anything else, turn your notification bells on right now, because you already know we going live and you don't want to miss a single upload. You don't want to miss a single community post, a single YouTube short, or a single live stream. So have your notification bells on so you won't miss shit. So let's go ahead and get into the Eagles wide receiver room rebuild. So the wide receiver room is going to look completely different than it looked last season. Obviously, the two heavy hitters at the top, AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, still locked up in place. Extensions for both of those guys. So those will be the dynamic duo. Those will be the faces of the wide receiver room for the next couple of years. But after AJ and Devontae, it's been a lot of change, a lot of shaking up, and I'm super excited for this wide receiver room rebuild, because the last couple of seasons, we just weren't getting what we were supposed to get out of our wide receiver 3 and slot receivers and depth pieces in the wide receiver room. So it's great to know that that has finally been addressed. So yesterday we talked about the secondary rebuild, which was way longer, way more complicated, because I combined the cornerback room and the safety room into one. And looking back, I should have honestly did cornerbacks separate from safeties. I just did a completely secondary rebuild. So go check that out from yesterday. Today we are talking about the wide receiver rebuild after free agency and after the draft. So first, let's talk about the guys that left the team, the guys that left the roster solo. See you later. Hopefully not. Quez Watkins gone, out of here. Quez experiment finally over. Wish him the best with his new team, Pittsburgh. He went to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, Quez is still young. He still has a lot of NFL years ahead of him. He could still turn into that guy. He could still be that guy in the league. But I'm glad that the Eagles finally moved on and realized that it just hasn't been working. And that can also be accredited to our wide receiver coach, which is a conversation for another day. Our wide receiver coach, who we actually retained, Aaron Moorhead, he hasn't developed anybody. Like we've brought in a lot of wide receivers via the draft, and none of them have been developed under Aaron Moorhead. I'm not coming for the man's job, but I'm saying, is it Quez? Was it John Hightower? Was it Jalen Reagor? Or was it Aaron Moorhead? Because come on now, Devontae Smith came ready. AJ Brown was obviously already a star when he came here. Who has Aaron Moorhead developed? We're going to talk about that. And we drafted 2 more wide receivers that are going to need development. So it's really going to show, is it the players? Is it Quez? Is it Jalen Reagor? Or is it our wide receiver coach? But anyway, Olamide Zaccheaus also departed. Olamide Zaccheaus, native of the area, left us in free agency. Olamide Zaccheaus was somebody who I watched a lot while he was with the Atlanta Falcons, because you guys do know I live in the ATL, so a lot of times I see a lot of Falcons games. Olamide Zaccheaus was a very reliable wide receiver 3 for the Falcons, and I was super excited when the Eagles signed him to Philly, because I saw what he was able to do with the Falcons. But I feel like the Eagles regime last season severely underutilized Olamide Zaccheaus, wasted his talents in my opinion, and prioritized Quez Watkins once he got healthy over Olamide Zaccheaus. And we saw a lot of flashes from Olamide Zaccheaus. 2 touchdowns, the Bucks game. I can't remember the other game, but he had 2 big first downs for us, 2 big touchdowns for us, diving catches. But we did not utilize him enough. So it's hard for me to see Olamide go, but gotta move on. Lastly, Julio Jones. Julio Jones gone. We didn't re-sign him. He hasn't signed anywhere else, but we didn't re-sign him either. So our departures from last season, guys that were on the field heavy. Our departures were guys that were on the field heavy. Quez Watkins, Olamide Zaccheaus in blocking mode, even though he's whatever, and Julio Jones. So those faces gone. Now let's talk about the guys that we brought into the team, the wide receiver that we brought into the team. So Paris Campbell we brought in. Devontae Parker we bought in via free agency. We drafted Johnny Wilson, a 6'6" wide receiver out of Florida State. We drafted Ainais Smith, projected slot receiver, gadget receiver out of Texas A&M. So Johnny Wilson and Ainais Smith, they were both taken in the 5th round by the Eagles. So the Eagles definitely looking to bolster up that wide receiver depth. I knew we would draft at least one wide receiver. I was honestly pleasantly surprised that we took 2. We signed Shaq Davis, a wide receiver from the New Orleans Saints. We signed him at the end of last season to a future reserve contract. And we also signed Austin Watkins at the end of last season from the Browns to a future reserve contract. And we signed Jacob Harris, a former Jags wide receiver, to a future reserve contract at the end of last season. So free agents, we signed Paris, we signed Devontae Campbell, we drafted Johnny Wilson, and we drafted Ainais Smith. And then we basically signed Shaq Davis, Austin Watkins, and Jacob Harris basically to a practice squad positions. So who stayed? Who are the guys that stayed in the wide receiver room? Who will be the familiar faces coming back? So A.J. Brown obviously extended, locked up for the long haul. A.J. Brown said he wanted to retire in Philly. It was so much conversation of whether he was happy here, whether he wanted to be here, whether he was going to be traded. And he kept saying, I want to be here. Stop listening to the media. Stop listening to these pundits. Stop listening to these talking heads and listen to what I'm saying. And it came true because A.J. Brown got extended 3 additional years. He's got the highest paid wide receiver contract currently. So A.J. Brown, here to stay. Devontae Smith, here to stay. Brenton Covey returning as well. Brenton Covey, obviously punt returner, wide receiver, but, you know, our special teamers, punt and kick return. Joseph Nagata stayed, even though, you know, he wasn't getting play time. And Griffin Herbert. Griffin Herbert, we signed at the end of last season to our practice squad. At the end of, in December last season, we signed Griffin Herbert. Did not see the field with Joseph Nagata either. But those are the guys that were on the team last year that are on the team this year. So we had 3 guys dip out. We drafted 2 guys, signed 2 free agents, signed a couple of guys to reserve free agent contracts, and then we had 3 faces of the team, AJ, Devontae, and Brenton Covey staying, and then we had 2 practice squad guys that stayed as well, Joseph Nagata and Griffin Herbert. Now, let's talk about how we think that this wide receiver room will stack up. Now, of course, we still have training camp, we still have mini camp, we still have OTAs, we still have preseason, but this is just an early glimpse, an early projection into what I think the wide receiver room could potentially look like. Now, when we talked about the cornerback room and the safety room, that was like a drastic change because we made drastic changes. It obviously wasn't any drastic changes in the wide receiver room because we still have wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 1B, 1A and 1B, and AJ and Devontae. But it's still fun to look at what we think could happen with the wide receiver room. And it's going to be a big battle at training camp, y'all, for the wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4, 5 spot, 6 spot. I think it'll be about 6 wide receivers that we will retain on the 53-man roster. And it's going to be a legit battle, y'all, because it's a lot of dudes. It's a lot of guys. And at the same time, even though we're really like looking to fill one position, like wide receiver 3, really, it's super important that we get wide receiver 3 right. And we saw last season and the seasons before how detrimental having a mid wide receiver 3 can be to the team. So even though we already got wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 locked up, yeah, wide receiver 3 is super important. And we've seen the last couple of seasons when you need that reliable guy, he has not been there. So this battle at training camp, I'm really interested in the wide receiver room. So when it comes to depth, obviously starting in a 3 wide receiver set, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. Now I see Ainais Smith early on projection. I see Ainais Smith being that guy ahead of Devontae Parker in the slot. And we'll see at training camp. Again, this is just an early projection, but Devontae Parker has been trending down fast. Older guy trending down fast in the league, which is when we signed Paris Cameron, when we signed Devontae Parker this offseason, I was instantly like, okay, we got to draft some wide receivers. And we did because I didn't think Devontae Parker was going to be a legit candidate for the top of the wide receiver room. So I project AJ, Devontae, and Ainais Smith being those top 3 initial guys, with Ainais Smith in the slot. Backups, we'll talk about this a little bit, but backups, I feel like Johnny, Wilson, Paris Campbell, Britton Covey, obviously Britton Covey. Devontae Parker's a question mark. I don't even know if Devontae Parker going to make this roster at the end of the day. Now, like I said, this is just early on initial projections. Paris Campbell still very serviceable, still has shown a lot, especially in the slot. Paris Campbell only downfall is that he's been hurt, and he's just going to have to stay healthy and remain healthy. But another big question is, will Johnny Wilson play wide receiver, or will Johnny Wilson play tight end? Because a lot of guys are projecting Johnny Wilson to potentially be a tight end. He's 6'6". I think he was second in the ACC in contested catches, but he still hasn't really got his ball control, and he still hasn't really got his foot speed all the way there to be a real super threat at wide receiver in the NFL. And then also people say that he's not very physical. Like he has a big frame, obviously, but he's not good at throwing his body around and using his frame enough when it comes to, you know, stiff arming and those contested catches and just bully ball, really. Like, he does not use his weight enough for bully ball, which can be taught, obviously, in the league, which he can develop in the league. But again, when it comes to our wide receiver coach, Aaron Moorhead, he has not been the best at developing wide receivers. And I think Johnny is the biggest project at wide receivers. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles develop him. But again, I obviously have him making the roster at least at tight end. Maybe experiment with him at tight end if he doesn't, pan out in the wide receiver room. But that was my biggest question mark, honestly. Where do y'all see Johnny? Do y'all see him like developing into that super big body threat at wide receiver? Or do y'all see him getting tested early on, getting reps early on at tight end? Y'all let me know when it comes to that. But obviously the guys that I think are going to be out is going to be Austin Watkins, Shaq Davis, Joseph Nagata, Griffin Herbert, Jacob Harris, all those basically practice squad guys that were out last season. But I do see a real possibility of Devontae Parker not making that 53-man roster. I don't even think that's a hot take. We basically drafted Johnny Wilson and Ainais Smith to battle it out, and drafted them basically to hope that they could be better than Devontae Parker at camp and project better for us this season. So again, wide receiver room is not that spicy. Not that many question marks. I feel like the biggest question mark is Devontae Parker. Will he make the roster? Will he not make the roster? Will Ainais Smith just go ahead and jump in? Will he be able to be an instant starter for us in the slot? And Johnny Wilson, will he stay at wide receiver? Will we be able to develop him into that dog status? Or will he get moved to tight end? I feel like those are the biggest questions when it comes to the wide receiver room. Outside of that, I don't think it's that many big questions. But y'all, let me know what you think. We are going to continue this rebuild series as the week goes along with the position groups that had the most change. So let me know what other position groups you want me to speculate on. I'm definitely going to do a linebacker one. Linebacker will probably be tomorrow. After linebacker, it wasn't really that much change, I feel like, at tight end. Offensive line change, definitely offensive line, so we definitely have to talk about offensive line. Don't think there was that much change. We'll talk about the defensive line because, I mean, obviously with the pass rushers, edge rushers, outside linebackers change there. But let me know what position groups you want to talk about, and we will go ahead and talk about it as we get through this Eagles 2024 rebuild series. Y'all like this video, leave a comment, subscribe, keep rocking with me, check out the links down below, buy me the coffee to fuel this channel, start the official SymoneWithTheSports merch collection, and until I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.